In a quiet little town where everyone knew each other's names, there lived two sisters who were as close as two people could be. These weren't just ordinary siblings, they were twins, born only minutes apart. Though they looked identical, their personalities couldn't have been more different. One was bold and adventurous, always chasing excitement, while the other preferred calmness and liked to stay in her own world. Life for them was simple, filled with laughter, schoolwork, and dreams of what the future might hold. Their home wasn't anything fancy, a modest house with a small garden out front, but it felt warm and safe. Their parents worked hard to give them everything they needed, and though money was tight at times, love made up for it. The family had its ups and downs like any other, but nothing that seemed unusual or troubling to anyone looking in from the outside. Theirs was a picture-perfect life, but all of that changed one crisp autumn evening when the unthinkable happened. It started off like any normal day. The sun set early, casting long shadows across the neighborhood. Dinner was served, homework got done, and bedtime routines followed without a hitch. But sometime during the night, something went terribly wrong. When morning came, one of the twins was gone, the younger twin, the quieter, more reserved sister had vanished without a trace. There was no note left behind, no sign of a struggle, no clue whatsoever about where she might have gone. Her bed was neatly made, her clothes still hanging in the closet, and her favorite book resting on the bedside table, as if she'd simply stepped out for a moment and forgotten to come back. Panic spread through the household like wildfire. The parents searched every room, called out her name, and checked everywhere a young girl might hide. Neighbors joined in, combing the streets and nearby parks. Someone even suggested checking the woods behind the house, though no one wanted to believe she'd wandered off alone into such a dangerous place. By mid-morning, the police were involved, and what began as a frantic search turned into a full-blown investigation. Detectives arrived, asking questions and taking notes. They spoke to the family, friends, teachers, anyone who might shed light on what happened. Did she seem upset lately? Was there anyone new in her life? Had she mentioned wanting to run away? Every answer led to more questions, but none brought them closer to finding her. Days stretched into weeks, and hope slowly faded. Flyers with her photo were posted around town, begging for information. Rewards were offered, yet nothing came of it. For the remaining twin, the disappearance was devastating. She couldn't stop thinking about her sister, replaying memories over and over. In her mind, why hadn't she noticed something was wrong? Could she have done more to protect her? Guilt weighed heavily on her shoulders, and sleep became impossible. Night after night, she lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering where her sister was. And if she was safe. As time passed, the case grew colder. Leads dried up, and the media moved on to newer stories. The once buzzing community fell silent again, though whispers lingered. Some believed the missing girl ran away because of problems at home, while others speculated about darker possibilities. A few even suggested she might have been taken against her will, though no evidence supported this theory. Despite the lack of answers, the elder twin refused to give up. She promised herself she would never stop looking for her sister, no matter how many years went by. Deep down, she held on to the belief that her twin was still alive somewhere, waiting to be found. That promise became the driving force behind everything she did, shaping the person she would grow up to be. Years later, as an adult, she carried the weight of that promise with her wherever she went. It influenced her career choice, her relationships, and even the way she saw the world. Though life moved forward, the memory of her sister remained frozen in time, a constant reminder of the bond they shared and the mystery that continued to haunt her. And then, unexpectedly, a glimmer of hope appeared. While working on another case entirely, she stumbled upon a piece of information that reignited her search. It wasn't much, just a vague reference buried deep within old records, but it was enough to make her heart race. For the first time in decades, she felt like she was getting closer to uncovering the truth. What she didn't realize yet was that the answers she sought wouldn't just bring clarity to her sister's disappearance, they would also force her to confront painful secrets about her own past. secrets that had been hidden for far too long. But for now, all she could focus on was the possibility that her sister might still be out there, alive and waiting to be found. 20 years had passed since that fateful autumn night when the younger twin disappeared without a trace. The town where they once lived had changed. New houses sprouted up, old shops closed down, and familiar faces were replaced by strangers. But for the elder twin, time hadn't dulled the ache of loss or the burning need to find answers. If anything, it only deepened with each passing year. As she grew older, life forced her to move on in some ways. She finished school, left home, and built a career for herself. Her work as a private investigator wasn't just a job, it was a calling born out of her relentless search for her sister. Every case she took on carried a piece of her own story. Whether it was finding missing children, reuniting families torn apart, or solving cold cases, she poured her heart into every assignment. It gave her purpose, but it also reminded her daily of the one mystery she couldn't crack. Her sister's disappearance. Her personal life, however, remained empty. Friends tried setting her up on dates, co-workers invited her to parties, but she always declined. Relationships felt too complicated, too vulnerable. How could she let someone else into her life when half of her still belonged to her missing twin? She often found herself staring at old photos of them together, wondering what her sister would look like now. Would she recognize her if they crossed paths on the street? Or had time erased even that connection? The town where they grew up became a place she avoided. Too many memories lingered there, memories of laughter, secrets shared late at night, and promises whispered under starlit skies. But most of all, it reminded her of the unanswered questions that haunted her. Why did her sister leave? Where did she go? Was she safe? Those questions followed her everywhere, echoing in her mind like a song she couldn't turn off. Over the years, rumors about her sister's disappearance swirled through the community. Some people claimed she ran away because of family troubles. Others speculated about secret boyfriends or involvement in something dangerous. A few even suggested she joined a cult or fled to start a new life far away. None of these theories satisfied her. They felt hollow, like guesses made by people who didn't truly understand what happened that night. But then, one day, while working on a completely unrelated case, she stumbled upon something unexpected. She was going through piles of dusty files in an old library basement, searching for information about a missing teenager from another town. As she flipped through yellowed newspaper clippings, one headline caught her eye. It mentioned a woman matching her sister's description, living under a different name in a distant city. Her heart skipped a beat. Could this be the lead she'd been waiting for? At first, she tried to stay calm. After all, false leads were part of her job. But the more she read, the harder it was to ignore the similarities. The article described a quiet, reserved woman who kept to herself and rarely talked about her past. Neighbors said she seemed kind but distant, always polite but never letting anyone get too close. One detail stood out: a scar on her arm, barely visible but noticeable enough for someone to mention it. Her sister had a similar scar from an accident when they were kids. She spent hours poring over the article, memorizing every word. Then she started digging deeper, using her skills as an investigator to track down more information. Social media profiles, public records, interviews with former co-workers, all of it pointed toward the same conclusion. This woman might actually be her sister. For the first time in decades, hope flickered inside her chest. Maybe she wasn't chasing ghosts after all, but hope came with fear. What if this wasn't her sister? What if it turned out to be another dead end, leaving her crushed yet again? And if it was her, why had she stayed hidden for so long? Did she not want to be found? These questions gnawed at her, keeping her awake at night. Still, she couldn't stop herself from pursuing the lead. Something inside her, a mix of desperation and determination, pushed her forward. She decided to visit the city where the woman reportedly lived. It was hundreds of miles away, nestled among towering skyscrapers and bustling streets. The contrast between this urban jungle and the sleepy little town she came from couldn't have been starker. Everything moved faster here. Cars honked impatiently. People rushed past without making eye contact, and the air buzzed with energy. For a moment, she felt overwhelmed. But she reminded herself why she was there, posing as a journalist writing a story about long-lost siblings. She began gathering information. She talked to neighbors, store clerks, and anyone else who might know the woman. Slowly, a picture emerged. People described her as hardworking but secretive, always paying her bills on time, but avoiding conversations about her background. 1. Neighbor mentioned seeing her sitting alone on her porch late at night, staring off into the distance as if lost in thought. Another recalled how she sometimes flinched at loud noises, as though startled by something. Each detail added another layer to the mystery. Who was this woman really, and why did she seem so guarded? The more she learned, the more convinced she became that this was her sister, yet doubt lingered in the corners of her mind. What if she approached her and it turned out to be a mistake? What if the woman denied knowing her altogether? Despite her fears, she knew she had to confront her. So one evening, armed with nothing but a photograph and a lifetime of unanswered questions, she knocked on the door of the small apartment where the woman lived. Her hands trembled as she waited, heart pounding in her chest. When the door finally opened, she froze. Standing before her was a face she hadn't seen in 20 years, but one she'd never forgotten. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Time seemed to stand still as they stared at each other, shock written across both their faces. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "It's me, your sister." The woman blinked, clearly taken aback. At first, she denied any connection, shaking her head and insisting she didn't know who this stranger was. But as the conversation went on, cracks began to show in her carefully constructed walls. Tears welled up in her eyes, and eventually she admitted the truth. Yes, she was the missing twin. But no, she hadn't been kidnapped or forced to leave. She had run away willingly, and there was a reason she never came back. That admission left her stunned. All these years, she'd imagined scenarios of her sister being taken against her will or trapped somewhere unable to return. Never once had she considered that her sister might have chosen to disappear. The revelation hit her like a punch, too. The gut, betrayal mixed with relief, anger mingled with joy. It was a whirlwind of emotions she wasn't prepared for. As they sat together in the dimly lit apartment, the missing twin explained why she left. Her words painted a picture of a childhood far darker than anyone realized. She spoke of feeling suffocated by expectations, of carrying burdens too heavy for a young girl to bear. There were secrets she couldn't share, fears she couldn't voice. Running away had been her only escape. Listening to her story, the elder twin felt torn. Part of her wanted to scream, to demand answers for the pain her sister's absence had caused, but another part understood the weight of silence, the need to break free. By the time they parted ways that night, tears streaming down both their faces, one thing was clear: their journey was far from over. Finding each other was just the beginning. Now came the hard part, facing the truth and deciding whether their bond was strong enough to survive the years of separation. The meeting between the two sisters left both of them shaken. The elder twin walked away from that dimly lit apartment with more questions than answers. Her mind raced as she replayed every word her sister had said. It wasn't just the revelation that she had run away willingly, it was why she had left that gnawed at her. The younger twin had hinted at secrets, at struggles too heavy for a young girl to carry alone. But what exactly were those struggles? And why hadn't she felt like she could turn to her own family for help? Determined to piece together the puzzle, the elder twin decided to dig deeper into their shared past. She knew there were things about their childhood that didn't add up, moments that seemed normal at the time but now felt unsettling in hindsight. She started by revisiting old memories, things she had pushed aside or dismissed because they didn't seem important back then. Slowly, fragments began to surface, bits and pieces of a story she hadn't fully understood before. She remembered how their father would often lose his temper over small things, a spilled glass of milk, a bad grade on a test, and how those outbursts would leave everyone walking on eggshells for days. She recalled late-night arguments between their parents, Muffled voices drifting through the walls, followed by an eerie silence that lingered long after the shouting stopped. There were times when their mother would cry quietly in the kitchen, pretending everything was fine when asked. And then there was the way their father always insisted on control over what they wore, who they spent time with, even the books they read. At the time, none of this had seemed unusual. After all, families argued and parents disciplined their children. It was part of life. But looking back, it felt different. The weight of those moments pressed down on her chest as she realized how much fear and tension had seeped into their home without her noticing. Maybe her sister had noticed. Maybe that's why she ran. To get a clearer picture. She reached out to people who had known them growing up: teachers, neighbors, friends' parents. Some were reluctant to talk, hesitant to dredge up old memories or speak ill of the family. Others opened up cautiously, sharing glimpses of what they had observed but never questioned. One teacher mentioned how the younger twin used to stay late at school sometimes, not because she needed extra help, but because she didn't want to go home. Another neighbor recalled seeing their father yell at the twins in the driveway once, his face red with anger, while their mother stood silently nearby. Each conversation added another layer to the story, painting a portrait of a household where love existed, but so did fear. The elder twin began to see patterns she hadn't noticed before: the way their father's words could cut deep, leaving invisible scars that took years to heal. She thought about how her sister had always been quieter, more withdrawn, and wondered if she had been trying to protect herself by staying hidden, by keeping her head down and avoiding attention, but something still didn't sit right. If their father's behavior was the reason her sister left, why hadn't she said anything? Why hadn't she reached out for help? The elder twin couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story, something bigger, darker, that her sister wasn't ready to share yet. Her investigation led her to an old friend of her sister's, someone she hadn't seen or spoken to in years. This person had been one of the few people her sister trusted during their teenage years, someone she confided in when things got tough. Tracking them down wasn't easy. They had moved away and changed their number, but eventually she managed to connect. Over coffee, she asked carefully about the past, framing her questions gently so as not to make the other person uncomfortable. At first, the friend hesitated, clearly uneasy about discussing something so personal. But after some coaxing, they admitted that her sister had once confided in them about feeling trapped at home. "She told me she didn't feel safe," they said, their voice barely above a whisper. "Not physically, not really, but emotionally. Like she couldn't breathe." The elder twin nodded, her throat tight. That description matched what she had pieced together so far. But then the friend dropped a bombshell. "She also said she was scared of your dad. Not just because he yelled or got mad, but because of the way he looked at her sometimes, like she owed him something." Those words hit her like a punch to the gut. She wanted to argue, to defend her father, but the memory of his piercing gaze stopped her cold. There were times when he had looked at her sister the same way, with an intensity that made her uncomfortable, though she couldn't explain why. Back then, she had brushed it off as concern or frustration. Now, she wasn't so sure. As she drove home that night, her mind swirled with conflicting emotions. Anger bubbled beneath the surface, directed at her father for making her sister feel unsafe, at her mother for staying silent, and at herself for not seeing the signs sooner. But alongside the anger was sadness for her sister, for the pain she had endured alone, and for the fractured bond they might never fully repair. The next day, she decided to confront her parents. It wasn't going to be easy. They were older now, frail and set in their ways. Bringing up the past would reopen wounds they had likely buried long ago, but she couldn't move forward without understanding the full truth. So she packed a bag, drove to their house, and sat them down for a serious conversation. At first, they denied everything. Their father insisted he had only ever wanted the best for his daughters, that any harshness was meant to teach discipline and responsibility. Their mother echoed his words, adding that raising kids was hard and mistakes happened along the way. But the elder twin pressed on, showing them evidence she had gathered: notes from teachers, accounts from neighbors, and most damning of all, her sister's own words. Finally, their mother broke down. Tears streamed down her face as she confessed that she had known things weren't right but had been too afraid to intervene. "I didn't know how to stop him," she sobbed. "He was my husband, and I loved him, but I failed you girls. I failed her." It was a painful admission, one that left the room heavy with regret. Their father, however, remained stubbornly defensive, refusing to acknowledge any wrongdoing. His denial only fueled the elder twins' resolve. She realized then that finding her sister wasn't just about reuniting their family, it was about holding everyone accountable, including herself, for the role they played in driving her away. Armed with this new understanding, she returned to the city where her sister lived. This time she came prepared, not just with questions but with answers. She brought recordings of their mother's confession, letters written by their father expressing remorse, though reluctantly, and a promise to listen without judgment. She knocked on her sister's door again, bracing herself for whatever reaction awaited her. When the door opened, her sister looked surprised but less guarded than before. Perhaps she had been expecting this visit, or perhaps she sensed that her elder twin wasn't giving up any time soon. Whatever the reason, she let her in without protest. They sat across from each other, the air thick with unspoken truths. The elder twin laid everything out on the table, the conversations with their parents, the stories from friends and neighbors, the pieces of the puzzle she had painstakingly put together. Then she waited, letting her sister absorb it all. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Finally, her sister sighed, a sound heavy with exhaustion and relief. "You deserve to know the truth," she said softly. "But hearing it won't fix everything. Some things can't be undone." And so she began to tell her side of the story, from the fear that gripped her every time their father raised his voice, to the shame she carried for not speaking up. Sooner, to the desperate need to escape a life that felt suffocating. It was raw and painful, but it was also honest. For the first time in 20 years, the sisters faced the truth together, not as victims, but as survivors. By the end of the conversation, tears streaked both their faces. Healing wouldn't come overnight, and forgiveness might take even longer. But for the first time, they allowed themselves to hope for closure, for connection, and for a future where they could stand side by side instead of worlds apart. The conversation between the two sisters stretched late into the night. The younger twin, now living under a new name and identity, spoke haltingly at first, her words weighed down by years of silence. But as she continued, the floodgates opened, and the truth poured out in waves. It wasn't just about their father's temper or their mother's inability to intervene. It was about the suffocating sense of being trapped, of feeling like there was no way out except through escape. She described moments that had chipped away at her spirit over time, the constant criticism, the pressure to be perfect, the way every mistake felt magnified tenfold. "It wasn't just what he said," she explained, her voice trembling. "It was how he looked at me, like I wasn't enough no matter what I did. Like I owed him something I could never repay." Her elder sister listened intently, her heart breaking with each revelation. She realized now that while they had grown up in the same house, they had experienced it differently. Where she had learned to adapt and survive, her younger twin had been quietly crumbling under the weight of expectations. But it wasn't just emotional abuse that drove her to leave, it was fear. Fear of what might happen if things escalated further. Fear of becoming someone she didn't recognize because of the environment she lived in, and fear of losing herself completely. "I couldn't breathe anymore," she confessed, tears streaming down her face. "So I ran. I thought maybe if I disappeared, I could start over, be someone else." Her elder sister nodded, trying to process everything she was hearing. It was hard to reconcile the image of their childhood home, a place she had always seen as safe, with the reality her sister had endured. She wanted to ask why she hadn't said anything, why she hadn't reached out for help. But deep down, she already knew the answer. When you're surrounded by people who either don't see the problem or are too afraid to confront it, speaking up feels impossible. As dawn broke, the younger twin shared more details about her life after leaving. She revealed that a trusted teacher had helped her plan her disappearance, providing guidance and resources to ensure she could start fresh somewhere far away. That teacher had become a lifeline during those early months, checking in on her until she found her footing. Over time, she built a new life for herself, quiet, solitary, but free from the shadows of her past. Yet freedom came at a cost. Cutting ties with her family meant severing not just the pain but also the love. For 20 years, she carried the guilt of walking away. Knowing how much it must have hurt her sister, when she finished speaking, the room fell silent. Both women sat lost in thought, processing the weight of what had been said. Finally, the elder sister broke the quiet. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I should have noticed. I should have done more." Her younger twin shook her head. "You were just a kid too," she replied softly. "We both were. None of this is your fault." Those words brought some comfort, but they didn't erase the years of unanswered questions or the ache of separation. They still had a long road ahead of them if they wanted to rebuild their relationship. Trust wouldn't come easily, not after so much time apart, but they agreed to take it one step at a time over the next few days. The elder sister stayed in touch, visiting her twin whenever she could. They talked about everything: their childhood, memories, the dreams they once shared, and the lives they had built separately. Slowly, they began to reconnect, finding common ground despite the distance that had grown between them. But there was still one piece missing: closure with their parents. The elder sister knew they couldn't move forward without addressing the role their parents had played in driving her sister away. So, armed with recordings of their mothers, confession, and letters written by their father, she suggested bringing their parents into the conversation. At first, her younger twin hesitated. Facing them again felt daunting, almost unbearable. But eventually she agreed. Understanding that true healing required confronting the past head-on, they arranged a meeting at the elder twins' apartment, a neutral space where everyone could feel safer. When the day arrived, tension filled the air. Their parents walked in looking older, frailer, and visibly nervous. Years of regret etched lines into their faces, making them seem smaller somehow. The elder twin greeted them warmly but firmly, setting the tone for what was to come. Then she introduced her sister, who stood quietly in the corner, her expression guarded. For a moment no one spoke. Their mother's eyes filled with tears as she took in the sight of her younger daughter, alive and standing before her after all these years. Their father, however, remained stoic, his jaw clenched tight. The elder twin stepped forward, breaking the silence. "We need to talk," she said simply. "Not just about what happened back then, but about how we can move forward." She played the recording of their mother's confession first, letting the raw honesty sink in. Their father shifted uncomfortably in his seat, refusing to meet anyone's gaze. Then she handed him the letters he had written, urging him to read them aloud. Reluctantly he complied, his voice shaky as he admitted his mistakes and expressed remorse. It wasn't perfect. He struggled to fully acknowledge the depth of his actions, but it was a start. Their mother spoke next, apologizing profusely for staying silent and failing to protect her daughters. "I was scared," she admitted, her voice breaking. "Scared of losing him, scared of being alone. But none of that excuses what I did or didn't do. I'm so sorry." Hearing their parents' words stirred complicated emotions in both twins. Anger, sadness, and relief swirled together, creating a storm of conflicting feelings. For the younger twin, it was especially difficult. Part of her wanted to forgive, to let go of the anger she had carried for so long. But another part wondered if forgiveness was even possible, or if it was something she owed them at all. The elder twin watched her sister closely, sensing the internal battle raging within her. She reached out, taking her hand gently. "You don't have to decide anything right now," she said softly. "This isn't about fixing everything overnight. It's about taking the first step." Her younger twin nodded, grateful for the reminder. She turned to their parents, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "If we're going to do this, if we're going to try to heal, we need honesty. No more secrets, no more pretending. Can you promise me that?" Their mother nodded immediately, tears streaming down her face. Their father hesitated but eventually gave a reluctant nod as well. It wasn't a grand gesture or a sweeping declaration, but it was enough for now. As the meeting drew to a close, the atmosphere shifted slightly. The tension eased, replaced by a fragile sense of hope. They weren't a family yet, not in the traditional sense, but they were beginning to lay the groundwork for something new. Something stronger, built on truth rather than denial. Later that evening, the two sisters sat together on the couch, reflecting on the day's events. Neither of them had expected it to go perfectly, and it hadn't. There were still wounds that needed time to heal, conversations that needed to happen. But for the first time in decades, they allowed themselves to imagine a future where they could stand side by side instead of worlds apart. "We've got a lot of work to do," the younger twin said finally, breaking the silence. Her elder sister smiled faintly. "Yeah, we do. But we'll figure it out together." And for the first time in a very long time, they believed it. The weeks that followed the emotional meeting with their parents were a whirlwind of emotions for both sisters. They had taken the first step toward healing, but it was clear that rebuilding trust wouldn't happen overnight. The younger twin still struggled with feelings of anger and betrayal, while the elder twin found herself caught between wanting to protect her sister and feeling torn about forgiving their parents too quickly. It was messy, complicated, and exhausting, but it was also necessary. One day, as the two sisters sat together in the elder twin's cozy living room, they decided to take a break from the heavy conversations. Instead, they flipped through old photo albums reminiscing about happier times. There were pictures of birthday parties, school plays, family vacations, and lazy summer afternoons spent playing outside. Each image brought back memories, some sweet, others bittersweet, but all of them reminded them of the bond they once shared. As they laughed over silly childhood antics and teared up at forgotten moments of joy, something shifted between them. For the first time in years, they weren't just two people trying to piece together a fractured relationship. They were sisters again, sharing stories and connecting over the little things that made their lives unique. It was a small victory, but an important one. Healing wasn't just about confronting pain, it was also about rediscovering the love that had always been there beneath the surface. But even amidst these tender moments, questions lingered. The elder twin couldn't shake the feeling that there was still more to uncover about why her sister had left. While she had learned about the fear and suffocation her twin felt at home, she suspected there might be another layer to the story, something her sister hadn't fully revealed yet. She didn't want to push too hard, knowing how fragile this newfound connection was, but curiosity gnawed at her. Eventually, she decided to broach the subject gently. "Can I ask you something?" She said one evening as they sipped tea on the porch. "You've told me so much about what happened, and I'm so grateful for that. But is there anything else you haven't said? Anything you're still holding on to?" Her sister hesitated, staring out at the horizon. The sun was setting, casting golden light across the sky, but her expression remained shadowed. After a long pause, she nodded slowly. "There is," she admitted, "but it's not easy to talk about." The elder twin waited patiently, giving her space to gather her thoughts. Finally, her sister took a deep breath and began to speak. "It wasn't just Dad," she said quietly. "It wasn't just his temper or the way he looked at me. There were specific things he did, things I couldn't tell anyone about because I didn't know how or if they would believe me." Her words sent a chill down the elder twin's spine. Specific things? What did that mean? She wanted to interrupt, to demand answers immediately, but she forced herself to stay calm. Whatever her sister was about to say, it clearly wasn't easy for her to share. "He used to corner me when no one else was around," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "At first, it was just lectures about how I needed to behave better, work harder, be perfect. But then it became more than that. He'd stand too close, invade my personal space, make comments that made me feel dirty, like I wasn't worthy of respect." The elder twin's stomach churned as realization dawned. Her father's behavior had crossed lines she hadn't even considered before. She thought back to those piercing stares, the the intensity in his voice, and suddenly it all clicked into place. Her sister hadn't just been afraid of him, she had been violated in ways that went far beyond yelling or criticism. I tried to avoid him, her sister went on, tears welling up in her eyes. I stayed out of his way as much as I could, but it didn't matter. He always found excuses to pull me aside to check on me or teach me lessons. And the worst part was, Mom never stopped him. Sometimes I think she knew what was happening, but she pretended not to see it, or maybe she really didn't know. Either way, I felt completely alone. By the time she finished speaking, both women were crying. The elder twin reached out and pulled her sister into a tight hug, holding her as if she could shield her from the ghosts of the past. "I'm so sorry," she whispered over and over again. "I had no idea. If I had known." Her sister shook her head. "You couldn't have known," she said softly. "No one could. That's why I left. I thought if I stayed, it would only get worse. And I couldn't let that happen." Understanding washed over the elder twin like a tidal wave. Now everything made sense. The secrecy, the fear, the desperate need to escape. Her sister hadn't run away because she was selfish or ungrateful. She had run away to survive, to protect herself from a situation that had become unbearable. That night, as they lay awake in separate rooms, neither of them could sleep. The elder twin replayed her sister's confession over and over in her mind, grappling with a mix of emotions: anger at her father, guilt for not noticing sooner, and overwhelming sadness for the pain her sister had endured. She realized now that finding her sister wasn't just about solving a mystery. It was about uncovering the truth behind. Years of silence and shame. The next morning, they sat down together and talked about what came next. Their parents had already admitted their mistakes and expressed regret, but this new revelation changed everything. Could they truly move forward knowing the full extent of what had happened? Or was forgiveness impossible under these circumstances? "We don't have to decide right away," the elder twin said gently. "This isn't something we can rush. You need time to process everything, and so do I." Her sister nodded, relief flickering across her face. "Thank you," she said simply, "for listening, for believing me." Over the following days, they continued to unpack the past, peeling back layers of hurt and resentment. They revisited old memories, examined patterns of behavior, and discussed how their family dynamics had shaped who they were today. It was painful work, but it was also cathartic. With each conversation, they grew closer, learning to lean on each other in ways they hadn't before. Eventually, they decided it was time to involve their parents again, not just to confront them with the truth, but to hold them accountable. The elder twin called their mother first, explaining what her sister had revealed. At first, their mother denied it, insisting she would have noticed if something so serious had been happening. But when presented with evidence, a journal entry written by her younger daughter detailing one particularly harrowing incident, she broke down completely. "I failed you," she sobbed. "I failed both of you. I should have protected you. I should have seen it." Their father, however, refused to engage. When confronted, he dismissed the accusations outright, claiming they were lies meant to tarnish his reputation. His denial infuriated the elder twin, but her sister remained eerily calm. "He's always been like this," she said bitterly. "Even when he's wrong, he'll never admit it." Despite his resistance, the truth hung heavy in the air. Whether or not he acknowledged it, the damage had been done. The question now was whether they could find a way to move forward, or if some wounds were simply too deep to heal. In the end, the sisters agreed to set boundaries. They would keep their parents in their lives, but only on terms that felt safe and respectful. No more sweeping issues under the rug. No more pretending everything was okay when it wasn't. It was a compromise, but it was the best they could hope for given the circumstances. As they stood side by side one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, the elder twin turned to her sister with a smile. "We've come a long way," she said softly. "And we've still got a lot of work to do. Though I'm proud of us for sticking together, for facing this head-on." Her sister returned the smile, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Me too," she replied. "We're stronger than we think." And for the first time in 20 years, they truly believed it. The journey to healing wasn't a straight path. It twisted and turned, full of ups and downs. For the two sisters, every step forward felt like a small victory, but it also came with its share of setbacks. There were days when old wounds reopened, moments when anger flared unexpectedly, and times when the weight of everything they'd uncovered seemed too heavy to bear. But through it all, they held on to one unshakable truth. They weren't alone anymore. They had each other, and that made all the difference. As weeks turned into months, their bond grew stronger. They spent hours talking about their childhood, their fears, their dreams for the future. Some conversations were light-hearted, filled with laughter as they shared funny stories or inside jokes only twins could understand. Others were raw and emotional as they worked through the pain of the past. Slowly they began to rebuild what had been broken, not just their relationship, but also their trust in themselves and each other. One sunny afternoon, they decided to visit the lake near their childhood home. It was a place they used to go often as kids, skipping stones across the water and dreaming about growing up. The elder twin suggested the trip, hoping it might bring some closure to their journey. Her sister agreed, though she hesitated at first. Returning to familiar places stirred mixed emotions. Nostalgia mingled with memories she'd rather forget. But something about the idea of standing by the water again felt right. When they arrived, the scene was exactly as they remembered it. The lake shimmered under the sunlight, its surface rippling gently with the breeze. Trees lined the shore, their leaves rustling softly in the wind. It was peaceful, almost magical, a stark contrast to the chaos they'd faced over the years. They walked along the edge of the water, their footsteps crunching against the gravel. Neither spoke at first, content to simply take in the view. Then, breaking the silence, the younger twin bent down and picked up a flat stone. "Remember this?" she asked, holding it up with a faint smile. Her sister grinned. "Of course. We used to skip rocks here all the time." She grabbed a stone of her own and demonstrated, sending it skimming across the surface. 1 bounce, 2 bounces, 3. Her sister laughed and tried next. Her throw not quite as smooth, but still impressive enough to earn a cheer. For a while, they played like children again, competing to see who could get the most skips. It was a simple game, but it brought them back to a time before secrets and hurt overshadowed their lives. As they laughed and teased each other, it felt like no time had passed at all. But eventually the mood shifted. Standing side by side, gazing out at the water, the younger twin sighed. "Do you think we'll ever really be okay?" she asked quietly. "Not just us, but everything?" The elder twin thought for a moment before answering. "I don't know if we'll ever be completely okay," she admitted. "Some things leave scars that never fully heal, but I do think we can find peace. Not because we forget what happened, but because we learn how to carry it without letting it break us." Her words hung in the air, heavy yet hopeful. Her sister nodded slowly, absorbing them. "That sounds possible," she said finally. "Hard, but possible." They stood there for a long time, watching the ripples spread across the water. Each wave reminded them of the impact one action could have, the way a single decision, whether good or bad, could send shockwaves through an entire life. Their father's choices had shaped their childhoods in ways neither of them could undo. But so had their own resilience, their determination to face the truth and fight for a better future. Eventually, they sat down on the grassy bank, letting the warmth of the sun soak into their skin. The younger twin pulled out a notebook she'd been carrying lately, a habit she'd picked up during her years away. Inside were pages filled with thoughts, reflections, and even sketches. She flipped to a blank page and started writing, her pen moving steadily across the paper. "What are you doing?" her sister asked curiously. "Writing a letter," she replied without looking up. "To myself. To remind me of where I've been and how far I've come," the elder twin smiled. "Can I read it when you're done?" Her sister hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, maybe someday." It was a small gesture, but it meant a lot. Sharing pieces of herself like this, a part of her soul poured onto paper, was her way of saying she trusted her sister completely. That kind of vulnerability didn't come easily, especially after years of guarding her heart. But it was proof. that they were moving in the right direction. Later that evening, as they drove back toward the city, they talked about what lay ahead. Their parents were still part of their lives, though interactions remained cautious and carefully managed. Boundaries had been set, expectations laid out clearly. Forgiveness wasn't guaranteed for either of them, but understanding was growing. Bit by bit, their mother had taken responsibility for her role in the past, vowing to support her daughters however she could. Their father, stubborn as ever, refused to acknowledge his behavior fully, but he kept his distance, which was enough. For now, the sisters agreed they wouldn't let his denial define their recovery. Instead, they focused on building a life rooted in honesty, love, and mutual respect. Back in the city, they settled into a routine of regular check-ins, phone calls, and visits. Sometimes they argued, frustrated by lingering hurts or differing perspectives, but they always found their way back to each other, guided by the promise they'd made early on, to stick together. No matter what, months turned into a year, and life began to feel more stable. The younger twin started seeing a therapist, encouraged by her sister to confront the trauma she'd carried for so long. The elder twin threw herself into her work as a private investigator, channeling her passion for justice into helping others navigate their own struggles. Together, they supported each other through every challenge, celebrating victories big and small. One day, as they strolled through a park near her apartment, the younger twin stopped suddenly. She turned to her sister, her eyes shining with tears. "Thank you," she said simply, "for never giving up on me, for finding me when I didn't think anyone would." Her sister hugged her tightly, blinking back her own tears. "I'd promised myself I'd never stop looking," she whispered. "And I meant it." In that moment, surrounded by the sounds of birds chirping and leaves rustling, they realized something profound. Their story wasn't just about loss and pain. It was also about hope, strength, and the unbreakable bond between two people who refused to let darkness win. They walked away hand in hand, ready to face whatever the future held together.